because you're not going to help anybody if you get sucked down into the despair. You're not going to be able to help yourself or anybody else. Whereas if you can feel it, but be light, then you have a chance. You have a chance to be creative, because when you're light, you can see everything, and you can be responsive and be creative to what's happening. Hello friends, John Dalton here for the Emergence podcast, where we go into love, consciousness and the mystery. And in this episode we're going into the nature of suffering, staying soft-hearted, everything passes, practical paradox, trying to change people, and treading lightly. Somebody sent in a question. They said, I don't believe God / the universe / the mystery wants us to suffer. I don't believe it has to be part of the human experience. I understand what you said before about creating the gap through meditation so that suffering doesn't need to bring us to breaking point, and then the gap in revelation. That makes enormous sense. But what about loss and grief, the big stuff? I still don't think God meant us to suffer these immense crushing blows, yet we do. I feel there's just a piece of the puzzle we're missing, and if we could just find it, even grief wouldn't be suffering. Many would say I'm naive. What do you think, John? So if you're listening and you don't know what this person is talking about this gap and suffering, in a previous episode I was talking about that we live in a culture that glorifies suffering, that no pain, no gain, that kind of thing. Like when the person was using this language of immense crushing blows, it immediately reminded me of that movie Shadowlands with Anthony Hopkins, where it's about the life of C.S. Lewis. And at the beginning, he's giving these talks about life and God and that kind of thing. And he's saying that the blows of God's hammer are so hurtful, they hurt us so deeply, yet they make us pure. That's in essence what he was saying. And then the story goes on where he falls in love, and then his wife gets cancer and dies. And so he has to kind of live that, what he was preaching about. And it's that thing of like, it hurt, but it made me stronger. It made me who I am. And what I was saying was that that's not actually true. In my observation, we have lots and lots and lots of pain, and then something happens and we break. Something breaks inside us. So in that C.S. Lewis thing, it's like the loss of the love of his life, his wife, her dying. He's on the floor, he's crying openly, and something happens, and he has an insight. So we've had that experience, lots and lots and lots of pain, and then something breaks inside us, and then we realize something. And then we look back and we go, well, I wouldn't have had that realization without all the pain. And I likened it to like a train, and each train, the carriage of each train is full of pain. And when you look back along the train, it looks like they're all connected. But when you come around to the side, you see there's a gap between each carriage. And it's in the gap that the insights come. And what I was saying was, when you don't glorify pain and you just see where the insights happen, they happen in the gap, then through meditation, you can make that gap, that stillness, where what happens after you break, when you let go of things, then you can see that that's where the insights happen. So you can make that the focus of your meditation, and you can have the insights, and then you're not glorifying pain for its own sake. So I don't know if there is a piece of the puzzle that we're missing. I'd love to be able to go, oh yeah, here's the piece of the puzzle you're missing. Because yeah, we do, don't we? We suffer these immense crushing blows, irrespective of knowing that, me included. From my knowledge of God, and for me it's important to kind of make the distinction between belief and knowledge. I don't believe in God, I know God, because belief always feels to me like, well, belief is something that you can't experience, and I experience God very directly, and I have for a long time. And that sounds lovely, but um, it's not. It's not that lovely, because the the sort of indoctrination I received about God was this, old man God sitting on a cloud up in heaven with the white beard who knew the number of hairs on my head, kind of thing. Very personal, very, keeping an eye on me and sort of sending me lessons and all that kind of thing. My knowledge of God is completely different. My knowledge of God is, I talk about the mystery of a lot. That's what the mystery is in a way. And I was only writing about this last week when I was talking about manifestation. I was talking about, likening it to one of the friendly bacteria in my gut. And if I was to have a conversation with that friendly bacteria and say, well, what are you part of? And they go, I don't know what I'm part of. I'm part of a bigger thing. And I just know about being a friendly bacteria. And my focus of my life is just to be the best friendly bacteria I can be. But beyond that, I don't know. And I was kind of going, that little friendly bacteria wouldn't understand about the sort of things that that I know about, like air travel and paying the gas bill and quantitative easing and all that kind of stuff. It wouldn't have no comprehension of it. And I feel kind of the same way about my knowledge of God. I know I'm part of God. I know it's in me. And I'm just using the word God. Even the word God doesn't really, it's very loaded. It doesn't really convey what it is. It's this huge, vast, mysterious thing that seems to be doing something. It seems to have a particular movement to it that seems to be going along with, a particular purpose that it only knows. I don't know what it is. So, like, the idea, like, from my little perspective, I don't want anybody to suffer. If I was running the show, I wouldn't have anybody suffer at all. And my sense is that there's an element to that whole process that is to do with unconsciousness, because that definitely seems to be what's going on. We all seem to be in the process of becoming more conscious. Now, you could say, oh, well, look, I know my Uncle Jim. He's definitely not becoming more conscious. He hasn't changed a bit, But in my observation, it goes on inside people all the time, whether they know it or not, whether they're conscious of becoming more conscious or not. It doesn't make any difference. It's going on. They are becoming more conscious. You can see it through the passage of time. People call it getting wiser or getting more mellow. I mean, people can become more bitter and whatever, but it's not a uniform thing. There seems to be consciousness happening all the time. So possibly that's what's going on in terms of God and what the point of God is. And there's our other schools of thought that go, oh, non-attachment, all suffering, comes from attachment. And yes, there is there is an element of truth in that, but then that's kind of the deal here. We are cuddly little creatures who like to cuddle each other. We like to get attached to each other. And yes, it hurts like hell when the thing that we're attached to gets taken away from us. But that seems to be kind of the deal here, because you've probably met people who have they've just gone straight into spiritual bypass and they're like, oh, I'm not attached to anything, and all that kind of thing. But you can tell that it's a defense thing. They're just trying to protect themselves from getting hurt. That doesn't seem to work either. And then I haven't really met anybody who is above it all, who doesn't react, who doesn't respond. And my sense is you're kind of supposed to. It's kind of the deal here, I always think of cinemas, it'd be like going to the cinema and spending the whole time watching the movie going, this is just shadows on the wall. This isn't a real thing, Like, who wants to do that? Either nobody wants to go to the cinema with that person. But even for that person, it's like, why are you in the cinema if you are just the whole time going, this is not real, this is not a real thing, this is just shadows on the wall. So I think there's part of it that we just want to have the experience. We want to get right into it. We want to have the big loves and the big losses. I don't know whether we want to have the big losses, but they happen. And we have the big heartbreaks. And they change us. They definitely change us. So I don't think it's a good idea. I'm not crazy about it. I don't advocate it. I'm not saying, oh, it makes you tougher, but it just seems to be a thing here of it. And what I've noticed in myself is that through meditation, I'm able to see all the different parts of me at the same time. I've, I've, I'm the container, in a way, of all these things. So when the crushing blows happen, I can see the part of me, the least conscious part of me, that's just heartbroken and devastated and on the floor crying and just uncontrollably grieving. And I can also see the part of me that is very detached and knows it's not real, and that knows that, in the analogy of a virtual reality, that we're living in a not completely real situation, that it's just pixels. It's not a real thing. There's a part of me knows that at the same time, and both can exist. Both, they don't contradict each other. And I think the main thing is to, and one thing that those kind of things, those kind of deep pains give us, is a bit of empathy for other people, and allows us to access their compassion, so that if you meet somebody who's just lost the love of their life, or has had one of these crushing blows, that you get it, that you're not, just going, well, it's not real, or I'm above this all, I'm not, or you're feeling that because you were attached. Now, if you just stop being attached, you just feel, with your little heart to their little heart, I understand why it's so terrible, why it's so painful. You're trying to, your wife has died, your husband has died, you want to see them, but you can't, so it's like you're trying to attach to them, but it's not. We understand that. We can love them. And we know it's not going to bring the person back, but we can love this person who's in pain. That's all we can do, I think. So I don't know if there's a piece of the puzzle missing. I think it's too, some part of me completely resonates with this of like, it shouldn't be. I kind of get that, It's like, when you begin to study Buddhism, and they say, oh, the first noble truth is all life is suffering. I always was like, well, I'm not just going to accept that. I know there are more noble truths. There's 4 noble truths after that, or, in total. And I get it and all that. But to start off from like, well, life is suffering, it's like, oh my God, that's so fatalistic, Like when it's there, I deal with it. But I don't kind of go, I don't expect it. And in a way, I don't, it's going to sound contradictory, I don't accept it. I accept it when it's there, but I don't accept that it has to be part of my experience. Because inside, all things being equal, and particularly in meditation, particularly when I'm in the mystery, there's no heartache in the mystery. There's no crushing blows in the mystery. There's no nothing. There's no highs either. It's not euphoric and whatever. It's the absence of everything. And yet, it's home. So I know it's not, it's kind of alien, that these crushing blows, this intense suffering, I know it's alien. And my God, it's all over the news at the moment. You can't avoid it. Even if you don't watch the news, which I don't, you can't avoid seeing this intense heartbreak and this intense suffering going on. And part of me always kind of goes, this shouldn't be happening. Not that the things that cause the suffering shouldn't be happening, that's another thing, but just like this poor little child, or this poor man, or this poor woman, or whatever, my heart goes out to them, as I'm sure yours does as well. And it feels alien. It feels like I wish that wasn't the case, But then, if it is the case in my case, if it's happening to me, then I face it as best I can, and I kind of still looking at it, and still seeing how it makes sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think it's important to face life as it is, without kind of thinking, oh, well, it's always going to be like that, because facing life as it is for me is also including the fact that I kind of go, that shouldn't be happening. That doesn't look like it doesn't resonate with me as a right thing to be happening at all. So, sorry, don't have the piece of the puzzle for you. I just have those reflections, but I hope it does help.
Now, let's have a look at some of the memes on the Further Emergence Instagram feed. The first one says, and sometimes the miracle is getting through the hard things with a soft heart.
That's the challenge that faces us all, is can we go through the hard times without getting a hard heart? Because you don't hear this phrase used much unless outside the you know battlefield. But this idea of dying from your wounds, it's amazing the number of people that you can see that the things that happened to them, they weren't able to recover from them. They weren't able to get better from them. And they slowly have been consumed. And maybe it's 40 years later, maybe it's 50 years later, maybe it's 10 years later, but they're dying of their wounds. So the challenge for us all is to not die of our wounds, to not let our heart become hard because hard things happen to us, to keep our heart soft and to keep our sweetness intact, even though terrible, awful things have happened. Terrible things have happened to me, I'm sure terrible things have happened to you as well. And it's like, well, am I going to just let that destroy me, cover me over completely? Or am I going to make it my business to keep my sweet nature, to keep who I am intact, and to maintain that? And if you can do that, it's a really miraculous thing. Like if you ever meet an old person who is very sweet and soft on the inside, that's a beautiful thing, because they've come through the hard times, they've they've transformed their pain, or they've got beyond their pain, or they haven't let it make them hard. And it's a lovely thing to see. I mean, I love babies and I love the innocence of babies, but I don't think babies are really innocent. I think they're really naive because nothing's happened to them. Whereas an old person who has reclaimed their innocence, that's very beautiful because they've had the terrible things happen, and they've made it their business to not let their heart get hard and to not let themselves die from their wounds, to heal from their wounds. It's a beautiful thing, and I think it's something it doesn't happen by accident. You have to work at it. You have to be conscious of it. You have to consciously go, no, that's not going to happen to me. And you have to make sure that you don't die of your wounds and you don't get a hard heart. Because I know you're a soft-hearted creature just like me. We all are on the inside. And it's just a matter of finding it under there. And it's not easy, but it's so worth doing.
I wrote the next one. It says, it comes in waves. If you run, it will keep pace with you. If you hide, it will find you. If you distract yourself, it will wait. Instead, breathe. Breathe steady, breathe slow, breathe through. It comes in waves and it will pass.
So this kind of follows on from what I was saying in my response to that person's question. And it's like, well, what do you do when you get the crushing blow? What do you do when the grief comes? And it could be grief, it could be fear, it could be depression, it doesn't matter, whatever it is. It could be any of those awful, difficult things that come to us and, they're just sort of so heavy. And it's like the most helpful thing you can know is that it comes in waves. So like if we're talking about grief, you're out somewhere and then suddenly something reminds you of the person who left you or the person who's died, and you feel awful and you feel just out of nowhere you want to weep in the supermarket or whatever. And the most helpful thing to know is the nature of how this stuff works, and that it comes in waves. And if you try and squash it down It never works. It always reminds me of like a sandwich. You squash it down, it comes out the side. So if you know it comes in waves, then you're kind of going, well, the more I let it come, the more I let it out, the more it will go pass through. Because when you try and stop it, it gets worse and you're holding it in and it builds up and the pressure builds and the pressure builds and the pressure builds. Whereas when you kind of go, oh, this just comes in waves, I'm just going to let it come, and then it will pass through. Then you've got a much better chance of it going through as slowly as it needs to. Because the difficult thing about when these things come in waves, it comes so hard, and it knocks the wind out of you. You're like, oh my God, I can't bear this. I can't bear this pain. But if you kind of know, oh, this is just a wave, it feels like it's lasting forever. It feels like this is never going to stop. But I know it is going to stop. If I just wait, if I just breathe, it will pass through. And that applies to pretty much everything. The knowledge that nothing lasts. When we're having the good times, we don't like to remember that. We don't like to remember nothing lasts. Because, well, I want the good times to last. But we know that the good times don't last, but also, and more helpfully, in the bad times when you've been kicked in the guts by a bit of grief, and you remember this will pass, this too will pass. It's one of the most helpful phrases to remember, particularly for when you're in pain, is this too will pass.
The next one is a series of Venn diagrams, 4 Venn diagrams. Venn diagrams are, those circles that intersect. And the title above it all is Things That Can Coexist. So in one Venn diagram, you have growth and mistakes. In another, you have anxiety and confidence. In another one, you have accountability and self-forgiveness. In another one, you have learning and unlearning. So it's saying that growth and mistakes can exist at the same time. Anxiety and confidence can exist at the same time. Accountability and self-forgiveness can exist at the same time. And learning and unlearning can exist at the same time.
This is such a great reminder that things can coexist, that we are not one thing or the other, because our mind would like us to think that, would like us to think we're either one thing or the other. We're either a good person or a bad person. We're either happy or sad, whereas this is so helpful to kind of remember that growth and mistakes can coexist, anxiety and confidence. It's a strange kind of thing to think that, isn't it? That you can be confident and anxious at the same time, because we're not really. It's not in the culture to kind of think, oh, you can be both. You can hold these two things at the same time. When that's what really goes on with us, isn't it? That's what really goes on inside us all the time. We could be 2, 3, 4, 5, many different things on the inside, all at the same time, and they all seem to contradict each other, and that kind of adds up to paradox, which is the currency of the spiritual life, that you can have many different things, that you can be very conscious of your intense goodness, and then you can be very conscious of your unconsciousness and how you have it in you to be cruel and hurtful and spiteful all at the same time. It doesn't add up, and it kind of melts your brain. And we want to be just one thing or the other. We want to be just, oh God, just let me be a good person, let me be a confident person, let me be a whatever. And we're not. We're multiple things all at the same time. And it's weird. It's like as soon as you accept that, and you kind of go, yeah, well, that's the way it is. That's the way I am. You can kind of get on with it. You can kind of, instead of trying to, fight yourself on the inside because you've got seemingly opposing things going on, you can go, yeah, I'm this thing and I'm that thing. I'm both these things. I'm all these different things. And what it does is it opens up space for you to feel the many other things that are going on inside you all at the same time. And it makes for a much more harmonious kind of life, because you're not beating yourself up because you're not just one thing. Because you're acknowledging, yeah, I'm many things. We're all many things. And it actually helps you to accept other people and to be a bit more compassionate to them, so that people can be very loving, very trustworthy, very loyal, and cruel and awful all at the same time. And you kind of sort of see, oh yeah, it's the same for everybody. It's the same thing inside that person. What they're dealing with, I'm dealing with. And we're all, doing our best inside the being inside each person, the bit of divinity, that spark. It's the same in everybody. And it's just a matter of what's covering them, how much unconsciousness is covering the person. But inside, the person is in there doing their best to shine, just like you are, just like I am. Some people shine brighter than others because they have less unconsciousness to shine through. But the essence of everybody is the same, as in my experience anyway.
And the last one is a quote from Aldous Huxley. And it says, "It's dark because you're trying too hard. Lightly, child, lightly. Learn to do everything lightly. Yes, feel lightly even though you're feeling deeply. Just lightly let things happen and lightly cope with them. So throw away your baggage and go forward. There are quicksands all about you, sucking at your feet, trying to suck you down into fear and self-pity and despair. That's why you must walk so lightly. Lightly, my darling."
Have you noticed the quicksands trying to suck you down into the despair? There's a lot of them around at the moment. There's a lot of quicksand, a lot of space for it. It's very hard to be light, isn't it? It's very hard to be light when you see all the terrible things. But it's when things are heavy that the power in this really shows itself. Because if you do get sucked into it, there's no end to that pit. That pit of despair, there's no end. It's just despair all the way down. It's not like you pop out the bottom, you don't. So it really is like you're walking across quicksand, and to be as light as you can with it, even though you feel it, even though you see the terrible things and your heart breaks and you want to despair and you want to go, what the hell? Why can't we just all get on? Why do we have to do this? To be light. I don't mean light-hearted. I don't mean spiritual bypass. I don't mean to kind of pretend it, to go, oh, it's all an illusion, man, it's not real. I don't mean any of that. I mean to feel it, but to stay with the lightness. And what I do is I look for what's good around me and inside me, because there's always good around me and there's always good inside me as well. So the two can exist. I can feel it. I can feel the terrible heartbreak and these terrible scenes. But then I can also look around and go, yeah, what a lovely sensation inside my body. What a lovely feeling of air coming into me. What a lovely feeling to be able to eat something. What a lovely thing to be able to see, to be able to look around at, well, I mean, I'm in a lovely place, but even, there's always a little flower poking through somewhere, a little blade of grass, a little smile, a little something. There's always something, and that helps. The lightness helps me reconnect. It'll help you reconnect as well with the lightness, so that you can hold these two. You can know you're walking over very dark, sticky, quicksand type of heavy, heartbreaking energy, but you can still walk over it lightly, because you're not going to help anybody if you get sucked down into the despair. You're not going to be able to help yourself or anybody else. Whereas if you can feel it, but be light, then you have a chance. You have a chance to be creative, because when you're light, you can see everything, and you can be responsive and be creative to what's happening. So yeah, old Aldous is onto something. And this is the guy who wrote A Brave New World, It's like A Brave New World in 1984. They're kind of two visions of the future, and we're kind of living through both of them at the same time. And his was much more, like 1984 was much more about external pressure coming in and crushing people. Whereas A Brave New World, as I receive it, was much more about being hollowed out from the inside by pleasure, by non-stop pleasure, and having a great deficit of heart and a great deficit to the soul. And we've got both going on at the moment. So it's these quicksands that he's talking about. He knows what he's talking about, because he thought about it a lot. And A Brave New World is very much about that. The quicksands that can suck all the marrow, all the juice out of life. So be light. Be as light as you can. All right, well, that's all I have for you this time. I trust you're well. I trust you're of good cheer. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.